My name is Ashley Lubke, and I am a student in SPC E683, Section 804 with Dr. Mugdwell. Today is Saturday, March 22nd, 2025, and I will be reviewing the SAFMEDS terms. I will adjust my camera so that you can watch me shuffle the cards. 1, 2, 3. I will cut the deck in half. I also have a timer set for 1 minute, which I will show you here. When I begin the timer, I will start reading the cards. Initial assessment of supervisee skills is critical for establishing clear goals of supervision. Supervise the initial assessment. Experimental design, in which participants are presented with 2+ response options. Each option is associated with distinctive SD and leads to different sets of treatment procedures. Concurrent chains design. State, provincial, or national government document. License. A stimulus change that functions as a reinforcer and increases the frequency of behavior it precedes. It does not rely on previous learning history. Primary unconditioned reinforcer. Teach behaviors across multiple stimulus conditions. Train sufficient exemplars. Teach behaviors to occur with consequences which are likely to happen in the natural environment. Introduce natural maintaining contingency. A procedure in which a person compares her performance of a target behavior with a predetermined goal. Self-evaluation. An assessment method that includes gathering information via direct observation and manipulation of stimuli. Direct preference assessment. I will set these cards aside and continue on. Punishment that requires the involvement of others. Socially mediated punishment. An emotional reaction of anger or frustration, including operant behavior which injures or is otherwise aversive to the controller. Counter control. An observer who is unaware of the study's purpose. Naive observer. Performance feedback to supervisors by their supervisees related to supervision procedures. Upward evaluation. Develop, improve, and maintain the behavior's analytical and ethical repertoires. Utilize behavioral case conceptualizations, problem solving, and support seeking by the supervisee. Enable high quality service delivery, improvements in client outcomes. Positive outcomes associated with evidence-based supervision. 2D graph that shows relative distribution of individual measures in a data set. Data points are not connected. Scatter plot. Multiple component treatment package for reducing unwanted habits. Habit reversal. Provides physical assistance as needed by having the instructor remain close to the learner and provide more restrictive prompting only when the learner is not responding correctly. Graduated guidance. A stimulus change that functions as a punisher and decreases the frequency of behavior that it precedes as a result of evolutionary development. It does not rely on previous learning history. Primary unconditioned punisher. Reinforcement that requires the involvement of others. Socially mediated reinforcement. The difference between the cost of a treatment or intervention and the projected benefits. Cost-benefit ratio. Vertical line drawn upward from the left-hand axis of the horizontal left-handed end of the horizontal axis. Vertical axis. Terminal goal should reflect the reinforcement that matches the natural environment, maximize contingencies within the natural environment, as well as making consequences indiscriminable. Thin reinforcement describes the behavior of making noises or sounds without social mediation. Vocal nonverbal. Voluntary credential issued by a private organization that is authorized by members of the profession, not the government. Professional certification. Might include a child learning curse words from peers or how to sing a song on the radio. Unplanned model. Straight horizontal line that represents passage of time. Horizontal axis. Schedule of reinforcement in which reinforcement is contingent on a response of being different in some specified way from previous response. Lag reinforcement. inadequate professional repertoire, difficulty problem solving, and database decision making, inadequate supervisory repertoire, unethical behavior, negative outcomes associated with lack of evidence based supervision, the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, empathy, variety of techniques for gradually transferring stimulus control with a minimum of errors, errorless learning, change of contingency of reinforcement by gradually increasing the response ratio or the extent of the time interval, schedule thinning, teach behavior to occur in all settings, sequential modification, provide clear guidelines for their members to follow when deciding a course of proper action and conducting their professional duties, ethical codes of behavior, occurs when the most salient component of a compound stimulus arrangement controls responding and interferes with the acquisition of stimulus control by the more relevant stimulus, overshadowing, stimulus change that follows a behavior of interest, consequence, vertical lines drawn upward from the horizontal axis to show points in time at which changes in independent variables occurred, condition change lines, single words or brief descriptive phrases printed along the top of the graph and parallel to the horizontal axis, condition label, statements describing corrective disciplinary and revocation actions depending on the circumstances for violations, if a professional, disciplinary standards, a schedule of reinforcement in which the response requirements or two or more basic schedules must be met in a specific sequence before reinforcement is delivered, change schedule, use self-instruction, self-recording, set up cues, mediate, generalize, covert events typically accessible only to the person experiencing them, private events, describe communication through speech, vocal, verbal, written guidelines that provide direction for conducting the practices associated with an organized profession, professional standards, when skills trained through behavior skills training are tested in the natural environment to allow learners to contact contingencies described in training, in situ assessment, brief descriptions of the dimensions represented by and scaled along each axis, axis label, the environment in which something occurs, setting, prior to preference assessment, potential tangibles that could act to increase future occurrences of behavior, potential reinforcers, a two-dimensional graph with a logarithmic scaled y-axis so that the equal distances on the vertical axis represent changes in behavior that are of equal proportion, semi-logarithmic charts, an assessment method that includes gathering information from familiar parties through surveys or interviews to determine what an individual might like, indirect preference assessment, designed to evoke a specific imitative response and may include teaching a child to say a word, brush his teeth, or paint a picture, planned model, allocation of responses to choice available on concurrent schedules of reinforcement, rates of responding across choice are distributed in proportions that match the rates of reinforcement received for each choice, matching law, antecedent intervention that provides on-contingent access to preferred sources of reinforcement, environmental enrichment, allows the client to access the reinforcers that have previously been maintained by the problem behavior, alternative behaviors, adherence to documentation expectations, participate in observations or rehearsals, respond professionally to feedback, meet performance expectations, seek clarification, provide supervisor with performance feedback, supervise the expectations. A behavioral effect associated with abrupt increases in ratio requirements when moving from denser to thinner reinforcement schedules, ratio strain. Skills are identified and sequence definitions for these skills should be developed and mastery criteria identified. Supervise the goal setting. A schedule of reinforcement in which two or more contingents of reinforcement operate independently and simultaneously for two or more behaviors, concurrent schedule. Behavior analysts are required to respect intellectual property laws by obtaining permission to use copyrighted or trademark materials and providing proper citations, attributions, or symbols, and refrain from unlawfully obtaining or disclosing proprietary information. Use of intellectual property. Embrace the participants' values, expectations, traditions, and ideas. Cultural match. consolidates, updates, and replaces the former BACB's professional disciplinary and ethical standards and guidelines for responsible conduct for behavior analysis compliance code. I will record my correct responses on this graph, take a picture of this graph for you, and submit it all when I am finished. Thank you.